I wasn't supposed to hear anything. I wasn't even supposed to be awake. But there I was, lying beside him in the dim glow of our shared room, heart racing in silence. His breathing was slow, almost steady, but I could tell something was off. The kind of quiet that wraps itself around you isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it feels like a warning. And tonight, it felt like that. Like something was about to happen, something I wasn't ready for. So I closed my eyes. I let my body go still. I let him believe I had drifted into sleep. But inside I was alert. Every breath, every rustle, every tiny movement near me sent a ripple through my thoughts. I didn't know what I was hoping to hear, or what I was afraid I might find out. But I knew this. Something in him had changed lately, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. He had stopped holding me the way he used to. You know, the kind of hold that isn't about touch, but about presence? He still slept beside me. Still made coffee in the morning. Still kissed me goodbye. But the warmth in all of that was dimmed. And I felt it like a chill under my skin. So tonight, I didn't want to confront it, not yet. I wanted to understand it first. And maybe pretending to sleep was the only way I'd get the truth he wasn't willing to say out loud. We hadn't been together that long, just over a year, but it had been intense from the start. He was the first person I ever told everything to. My past, my fears, how I used to pretend to be someone I wasn't just to feel accepted. I still remember the way he looked at me the first time I told him about the bullying in school, about hiding behind fake girlfriends and forced laughs. He didn't say much that night, but he held me, and I felt seen. That memory alone was enough to carry me through so many things. But lately it felt distant. Like a dream that fades the moment you open your eyes. And now here I was, afraid to open mine. Afraid of what I'd see. He shifted slightly on the bed, pulling the blanket closer to his chest. I could feel the mattress move with him, that small shift making my pulse jump. I kept my breaths even. Not too deep. Not too shallow. I'd practiced this before, back when I used to live with my father and wanted to avoid arguments at night. It was like slipping back into that old, protective shell. Pretend to be asleep. Pretend not to feel. Pretend until it stops hurting. But this time it hurt more, because this wasn't some stranger or an angry parent. This was him. The one I trusted. The one I loved. The day had started normally. He had made breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, just the way I liked it, though he forgot the pepper. He always forgot the pepper. And I had smiled, kissed him on the cheek, and told him it was perfect. He had smiled too, but it didn't reach his eyes. That used to be my favorite thing about him, how his eyes would light up, even for the smallest things. I'd seen that light slowly dimming for weeks, and I didn't know how to ask why without sounding paranoid or insecure. So I said nothing. Later that afternoon, he'd gotten a call. He took it in the hallway, just far enough that I couldn't hear the words. Just enough for my thoughts to spiral. He came back, said it was work, and sat next to me like nothing happened. I believed him. No, I wanted to believe him. But his shoulders were tense. His eyes avoided mine. And when I reached for his hand, he gave it, but loosely. Like he was somewhere else. That's why, when we got into bed that night, I already knew I wasn't going to sleep. My body might have been tired, but my heart was too loud. I turned to face the wall, my back to him, and waited. Waited to see if the quiet would speak louder than his words. And it did. It always does. There was a long silence after he turned off the lights. I heard him exhale softly. Then another pause. I could almost feel him thinking beside me, like his thoughts were a pressure in the room. He wasn't touching me. Not even by accident. It was like we were two strangers pretending to share a life. And maybe we were. Maybe he had changed, or maybe I was just finally seeing what had been there all along. But I needed to know. I needed to hear it from him. Even if he didn't know I was listening. That's why I stayed still, let the silence stretch. And then, he moved. He sat up slowly, careful not to shake the bed. I could feel the shift in weight. I heard the rustle of the sheets. I felt my throat tighten. What was he doing? Why was he getting up? Was he going to leave? Was he going to make a call? Or maybe he was just restless. I didn't know, and not knowing made every second feel like a blade hovering over my skin. He stood there for a while. I could hear him breathing, soft and deep. Then something strange happened. He whispered something. I couldn't make out the words. It was like he was talking to himself, or maybe to me, not knowing I was awake. I wanted to ask, to open my eyes, to pull him back into bed and ask why he was acting like a stranger in our home. But I couldn't. I was frozen. Afraid of the truth. Afraid of confirming what my heart was already bracing for. And so I lay there, still, quiet, heart pounding in the dark. Wondering what he would do next. Wondering if tomorrow, everything would still be the same, or if I'd wake up to a goodbye I never saw coming. I woke up the next morning pretending nothing was wrong, just like I had done the night before. The light was soft, peeking into the curtains, casting pale lines across the bed. He wasn't there. The space beside me was already cold, the sheets pulled back neatly like he had tried not to wake me. That wasn't unusual. He often left early for work, but today it felt different. I laid there for a while, staring at the ceiling, trying to shake off the heaviness sitting on my chest. I kept thinking about the night before. The whisper. The way he had sat up, spoken so quietly, and then slipped out of the room like a ghost. I never heard the door open. I never heard him come back. But when I finally fell asleep, I had hoped I'd wake up and it would all make sense. It didn't. I dragged myself out of bed and wandered into the kitchen. A cup of coffee sat waiting for me on the counter, the steam long gone but the gesture there. He had made it just the way I liked, 2 sugars, no cream. He always remembered that. I stared at it for a moment before picking it up. It was such a small thing, but it almost made me cry. Because that's the hardest part, isn't it? When love starts to fade, it doesn't leave in a storm. It disappears in the spaces between those tiny everyday moments. A missing good morning, a quiet dinner, a hug that feels just a second too short. I sipped the coffee and wondered how long he had been slipping away from me without me noticing. Around noon, I texted him. Hope your morning's going okay. Simple, casual. I didn't want to sound too worried. He replied an hour later, just one word. Busy. That was it. No heart emoji. No. Miss you. Just. Busy. I stared at the word for a long time, reading it over and over, trying to figure out what kind of busy he meant. Was he just overwhelmed? Was he pushing me away? Or was I just being paranoid again, reading too much into something harmless because I was scared of being hurt? I had a habit of doing that, doubting people before they had the chance to prove me wrong or right. But this didn't feel like overthinking. It felt like instinct. I spent the afternoon pacing around the apartment, picking things up, putting them back down. I cleaned the bathroom, rearranged books on the shelf, opened the fridge 5 times even though I wasn't hungry. Every sound made me jump, every silence made me feel lonelier. The truth was, I didn't know how to just sit with uncertainty. I needed answers, but I didn't want to push him. I didn't want to make him feel cornered. Still, a part of me kept going back to that whisper in the dark. It hadn't been angry. It hadn't been loud. It was soft, almost gentle. But I couldn't forget the way his voice had cracked slightly. Like he was holding something in. Something heavy. Later that evening, he finally came home. I was sitting on the couch pretending to scroll through my phone, but I heard the keys in the lock and felt my stomach clench. He walked in, smiled faintly, and said, "Hey." I looked up and forced a smile. "Hey. Long day?" He nodded and walked past me, putting his bag down. He didn't sit next to me like he usually did. He just moved around the room, going through the motions. I watched him, trying to find something, anything, that would tell me what he was thinking. But his face gave away nothing. I didn't want to bring up the night before, not yet. So I tried something else. "Wanna order dinner tonight?" I asked. "I was thinking Thai maybe?" He paused, then shrugged. "I'm not really hungry." That was new. He always loved Thai. Always had a craving for spicy food after long days. I felt my throat tighten. "Are you okay?" I asked, quieter this time. He turned toward me and gave me a look that almost broke me. Not because it was angry. Not because it was cold. But because it looked tired. Like someone trying to hold themselves together with pieces that no longer fit. "Yeah," he said. "Just tired." We sat in silence after that. Not awkward silence, something heavier. Like we both wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. And then, for a moment, I thought maybe this was my chance. I almost opened my mouth. Almost asked him about the night before. About what he whispered. About what he did while I pretended to sleep. But fear held me back. Fear that whatever answer he gave would change everything. And once you hear something, you can unhear it. So instead I nodded. "Okay. Let me know if you change your mind about dinner." He gave a small nod and walked into the bedroom, closing the door behind him. And I was left sitting there, the sound of that door clicking shut echoing louder than anything he had said. The rest of the night was quiet. Too quiet. I could hear him moving around, could hear drawers opening, could hear the shower running. But not once did he come back out to sit with me. And I didn't go in to find him. I sat on the couch, watching the screen of my phone light up with nothing. Just the glow, the ticking clock, the growing sense that something between us had shifted, and I didn't know how to stop it. I thought about all the things I could have done differently. Was I too needy? Too distant? Had I missed a sign? Had he been trying to tell me something without saying it out loud? My head was full of questions, but my heart only had one. Did he still love me? Because love doesn't always disappear in a fight. Sometimes it dies quietly, under the weight of unspoken words and unshed tears. And that night, I felt like I was starting to mourn something that wasn't even gone yet, but already fading. I couldn't sleep again that night. Not even close. I lay on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that still smelled like him, listening to the distant sounds of the city outside our window. The faint hum of passing cars, the occasional bark of a dog, the wind nudging the curtains against the frame. It all felt so distant, like background noise to a reality that was cracking open slowly around me. My eyes were tired, but my mind wouldn't shut down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his back as he walked into the bedroom. Every time I tried to relax, my body tensed again, remembering the sound of his whisper the night before. I still couldn't figure out what he said. I replayed it in my head over and over like a broken record, trying to catch a word, a syllable, a clue. But all I could remember was the way his voice shook, like someone standing on the edge of something they didn't know how to escape. At some point, I drifted into a half-sleep. Not the kind that rests your body, but the kind that traps you in that hazy place between dreaming and staying awake. And in that space, I imagined things. I imagined him sitting on the edge of the bed again. I imagined him whispering something like, "I can't do this anymore," or, "I wish things were different," or worse, "I'm sorry." I didn't know what was real anymore. My imagination had become louder than my memories, and both were filled with him. When I woke up fully, it was still dark. Maybe 3 a.m., maybe later. I didn't check. The apartment was silent, but I knew he was awake. I could feel it. That strange connection we had, the one that always told me when something was wrong, it was humming beneath my skin. I sat up quietly, heart racing, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to walk into the room, sit beside him, and just say it all. Everything I'd been thinking. Everything I'd been afraid of. But the other part, the part that was terrified of being right, told me to wait. Told me to listen. So I got up and tiptoed toward the hallway, feet light on the wooden floor. I stood outside the bedroom door for a moment, holding my breath. I could hear something. Faint. A soft murmur. At first I thought he was on the phone, but no, I didn't hear another voice. It was just him. Talking. To himself. Or maybe, to me. I moved closer, careful not to let the floor creak. I leaned gently against the door, barely breathing. And that's when I heard it. His voice, quiet, low, broken. "I don't know what to do anymore," he said. "I love him, but I'm scared. I'm so scared." My chest tightened instantly. He paused, and I imagined him sitting on the edge of the bed again, maybe with his head in his hands. "I don't want to hurt him." "But I already am, aren't I?" he continued, his voice cracking. "He deserves someone who isn't stuck like this." I pressed my palm to the door, heart pounding. He didn't know I was there. He didn't know I could hear him. And what I was hearing didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It wasn't a confession of betrayal. It wasn't a goodbye. It was fear. It was confusion. It was love wrapped in pain. And in that moment, everything inside me shifted. He wasn't pulling away because he stopped loving me. He was pulling away because he didn't know how to carry the weight he was holding. Maybe it was about his past. Maybe it was about family. Maybe it was about how hard it is to be soft in a world that doesn't always understand two men loving each other. I didn't know exactly what his fear was, but I knew it wasn't about me being unworthy. It was about him feeling not enough. I backed away from the door slowly, afraid the sound would stop if I stayed. I walked back to the couch, sat down, and stared at the dark ceiling again. This time, I wasn't imagining him leaving. I was imagining how much pain he had kept to himself just to protect me. And how alone he must have felt doing that. I had spent so much time trapped in my own head, afraid he was drifting, when maybe he was just drowning. I thought about the first time he told me he loved me. We were walking in the rain, no umbrella, laughing like idiots. We ducked under an awning, soaking wet, and he looked at me and said, "This is probably a stupid time to say it, but I love you." I remember how his voice trembled back then too. I thought it was just nerves, but now I realized it was always fear. Not of me, but of losing the safety he felt with me. Of messing it up. Of being too broken for something this good. I stayed awake the rest of the night, thinking. Not about what to say. Not about how to confront him. But about how to hold space for him, the way he had once held space for me. Maybe this wasn't about uncovering secrets or demanding answers. Maybe it was about patience. About listening even when the words weren't meant to be heard. About loving someone even when they're struggling to love themselves. When the first light of morning crept in, I heard him stirring again. The sound of drawers, the soft shuffle of footsteps. He walked out into the living room and paused when he saw me sitting there, still awake. Our eyes met. His lips parted, as if to speak, but no words came out. I didn't push. I just gave him a small, tired smile and said, "Didn't sleep much?" He nodded slowly. "Me neither," he replied. He sat down across from me, silence stretching between us. But this time, it wasn't a wall. It was a bridge. And I was ready to cross it. He sat across from me in the pale light of morning, his eyes tired, hair slightly messy from tossing in bed. There was something vulnerable about him in that moment. Something raw. Like all the weight he had been carrying was finally too heavy to hide. He didn't say anything right away, and neither did I. The silence between us was no longer suffocating. It was thick with meaning. Like we both knew we were finally standing at the edge of something we couldn't avoid anymore. My fingers twitched nervously around the mug I hadn't even sipped from, and I kept glancing at him, wondering if he would speak first. But he didn't. He just stared at his hands, thumbs brushing against each other slowly, as if that motion was the only thing grounding him. I thought about everything I'd overheard the night before. Those words weren't meant for me, but they changed everything. For so long I'd assumed the worst. I thought he was drifting because he didn't care anymore. I thought maybe he was tired of me, or worse, ashamed of what we had. But now I knew he wasn't pulling away out of rejection. He was crumbling under fear, trapped by something he hadn't yet learned to say out loud. And that changed everything for me. I had spent the last few weeks focusing on the way his arms didn't wrap around me the same, the way he avoided my gaze, the way our conversations had become short and surface level. But I hadn't seen his fear. I hadn't seen the way he was trying to protect me from whatever was unraveling inside him. "You want to talk?" I finally asked, my voice quiet, not pressing. Just an invitation. His eyes lifted slowly to meet mine. I saw hesitation, maybe guilt, maybe shame. But I also saw a flicker of relief. Like someone who had been holding their breath for too long. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back, exhaled sharply, and closed his eyes for a few seconds. Then he said, "I don't even know where to start." I nodded, understanding. I didn't push him. I just whispered, "Wherever you can." He opened his eyes again, and something inside him shifted. Not much, just a little crack in the armor. But I saw it. I felt it. He began slowly. Talking about stress at work, about how tired he'd been, how he didn't feel like himself anymore. I listened, nodding gently, encouraging him without interrupting. And then, after a long pause, he said something that hit me hard. "Sometimes I still feel like I don't deserve this," he admitted. "Like this, us, like I'm waiting for it to break." I blinked, caught off guard by how deeply that line pierced me. "Why would you feel like that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked at me then, eyes a little glassy. "Because it's good. Because you're good. And I've spent so much of my life hiding, pretending. I'm still unlearning all that. And I guess I started pulling back because I didn't know how to be this open, this exposed. I didn't know how to be loved without wondering when it would be taken away." Those words didn't just hurt, they echoed. Because in some way, I understood that feeling too. I knew what it was like to look at happiness and see a countdown. To feel like you were holding something fragile with shaking hands, just waiting for it to fall apart. And suddenly, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't confused. I just wanted to hold him, not just physically, but emotionally. I wanted to wrap myself around that pain and tell him he didn't have to carry it alone. I set the mug down, leaned forward, and placed my hand on his. He didn't pull away. If anything, he squeezed back, like he was afraid I'd let go. I said, "You don't have to pretend with me. Not ever. I'd rather face your fears with you than be locked out of them." His lip quivered just a little. "I didn't want to scare you." he whispered. I thought if I told you everything, maybe you'd look at me different. I shook my head slowly. I already see you. The real you. The one who makes me coffee every morning, even when he forgets the pepper. The one who sat in the rain and told me he loved me. The one who whispers things at night thinking I'm asleep. That last line made him freeze. His eyes widened slightly, and a flicker of fear crossed his face. You heard that? He asked, voice barely audible. I nodded. Not everything. But enough. He looked down again, swallowing hard. I didn't know how else to say it. He muttered. I've been feeling like I'm failing you. Like I'm failing myself. And last night, I just broke a little. I scooted closer, so close our knees touched. You didn't fail me. You've never failed me. You just forgot that I'm on your team. That whatever you're fighting, I'm here to help you fight it. The room was quiet again, but not heavy. Just still. Like we were both sitting in the wreckage of unspoken fears, realizing that the walls between us weren't as solid as they had seemed. He reached for me then, slowly, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. But I leaned into it. I let him rest his head against my shoulder, let his breath settle against my skin. And for the first time in weeks, I felt him fully there. Present. Real. Vulnerable. We didn't talk much more after that. Words weren't necessary. Just the silence, the closeness, the gentle reminder that no matter how loud the fears got, we still had this. We still had each other. He held my hand tightly, and I could feel it, that quiet plea, that unspoken promise. It wasn't fixed. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But the fear wasn't winning anymore. We were. Because this time, we weren't pretending to be okay. We were just trying to be honest. And sometimes that's the first real step back to love. That evening, the light outside shifted slowly, painting the apartment in gold and then in shadows. We barely moved from the couch. It was one of those strange in-between spaces in life where nothing dramatic is happening, but inside, everything is shifting. He had fallen quiet again, but this time, it didn't feel like distance. It felt like he was processing, like the weight of finally speaking the truth had left him raw, exposed, and maybe even a little lighter. I didn't want to push him. I just wanted to be near him, to let him know I wasn't going anywhere. Sometimes love doesn't come in declarations or dramatic gestures. Sometimes it's in the way you sit beside someone without asking for more, without demanding they be better or stronger or different. Just being there, that's love too. After a while, he got up quietly, like he was afraid to break the stillness between us. He disappeared into the bedroom, and I heard drawers open, a soft sigh, the creak of the closet door. I waited, not following, not questioning. Minutes passed. Then he came back with something in his hand, an old notebook, faded at the edges, the kind of thing people usually keep hidden in drawers they rarely open. He sat down again, holding it with both hands, his fingers brushing lightly over the cover. I've been writing things down, he said, his voice steady but soft. Stuff I didn't know how to say out loud. Thoughts. Fears. Things I've been scared would sound stupid if I spoke them. He didn't ask for permission. He just opened the notebook and started reading. The words came slowly at first, like he was still testing if it was okay to let them live outside his mind. I feel like I'm always pretending, he read. Like if I let myself be too soft, too vulnerable, people will think I'm weak. I've spent years building up walls, and now that I have something real, I don't know how to live without them. He paused, swallowed hard, then continued. He makes me feel safe, but also terrified. Because if I lose him, I don't know who I'd be without that safety. I felt something deep in my chest break open hearing those words. Not in a painful way, but in the way that happens when someone trusts you with the parts of themselves they usually hide. He flipped a page, continued reading. Sometimes I look at him while he's sleeping and wonder what he sees in me. I wonder if he'll wake up one day and realize I'm too much. Or not enough. I hate that my love for him comes with this much fear. But I don't know how to love without being scared. His voice faltered there. Just a little. He closed the notebook slowly, setting it down on the coffee table like it was made of glass. Then he looked at me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw him. Not just the version he presented to the world. Not the calm, collected, always in control man I had fallen for. But the boy underneath. The boy who had learned to be quiet, to hide, to toughen up so the world wouldn't crush him. I reached over and placed my hand over his. It was warm, trembling slightly. "Thank you for letting me hear that," I said, voice low. "You're not too much. And you're more than enough." He closed his eyes, like he needed a moment to take that in. "I've been so afraid of needing you," he said after a while. "Like if I let myself need you too much, I'd lose something. My independence, maybe. My strength. I don't know. But the truth is, I do need you. And not in a desperate, unhealthy way. Just, you make me feel like I can breathe." I moved closer, wrapping my arms around him this time, holding him tightly. I could feel his heartbeat through his shirt, fast and nervous. I rested my chin on his shoulder. "You don't have to be strong all the time. You don't have to prove anything. Not to me." We stayed like that for a long time, just breathing in sync, wrapped in quiet understanding. Outside, the city moved on as usual, cars honking, people walking, lights blinking on in apartment windows. But in that small corner of the world, something sacred was happening. Not flashy, not dramatic, but real. The kind of moment that relationships are built on. The kind that rewrites the distance between two people and closes the gaps that silence once carved. Eventually, he pulled back, just enough to look me in the eyes. "Do you ever feel like you're faking it?" he asked suddenly. "Like you're just pretending to be okay because the world expects it?" I nodded slowly. "All the time," I said. "But I've learned that pretending doesn't make the pain go away. It just hides it. And hiding something doesn't mean it stops hurting. It just starts hurting alone." He exhaled a shaky breath and leaned back against the couch. "I think I've been hurting alone for too long." I placed my hand on his chest, right over his heart. "You don't have to anymore." He covered my hand with his, holding it there like it was anchoring him. "I want to believe that," he whispered. "I want to believe I can be this version of me with you. The broken one. The scared one. The one who still has nightmares sometimes and wakes up afraid of being left." I leaned in and kissed his temple gently. "You don't have to be anything but you. I'm not in love with your strength. I'm in love with your honesty. Your heart. All of it, even the messy parts." He closed his eyes, and I watched the tension begin to slip from his face. Maybe not all at once, but enough to see the difference. That evening, we didn't need loud declarations or grand promises. We just needed the silence, the space, and the soft surrender that came from finally letting the truth be seen. And in that quiet, we began to find our way back to each other. Not the same way as before, but deeper. More real. More whole. The days that followed moved slowly, like time was learning how to breathe again. We weren't suddenly perfect, and nothing magically snapped into place, but something between us had softened. There was no more pretending, no more carefully chosen words or polite distance. We didn't dance around each other like strangers sharing space. We started living together again like two people who remembered why they chose each other in the first place. But just because things felt lighter didn't mean they were easy. The wounds were still fresh, just not hidden anymore. We'd ripped off the bandage and decided to heal with the light on. And that meant facing things we had both pushed down for far too long. One evening, we were lying in bed, his arm loosely around my waist, my head resting on his chest. The quiet between us felt different now. Not filled with unspoken thoughts or avoidance, but the kind of calm that comes when two people are finally comfortable in silence. I traced small circles on his shirt with my finger, feeling his heartbeat beneath my touch. He was awake, and so was I, even though the clock on the nightstand blinked past midnight. I think we both knew that sleep wasn't coming just yet. He exhaled slowly, and then he said something I hadn't expected. "Can I ask you something personal?" I nodded without hesitation. "Of course." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Why did you pretend to sleep that night?" The question hung in the air like fog. Not accusatory. Not bitter. Just curious. Honest. I took a breath, held it for a second, and then let it out slowly. "Because I was scared," I admitted. "Scared that if I asked you what was wrong, you'd lie to protect me. Or worse, you'd tell me the truth and it would hurt more than the silence did." I sat up slightly, turning to face him better. I didn't know what I was going to hear, but I needed to know. Even if I wasn't ready to face it, I had to feel it. "Does that make sense?" He nodded, his eyes focused on mine. "It does," he whispered. "And I'm sorry. I should have just told you I was struggling. I thought I had to handle everything alone." I reached for his hand and held it tightly. "You don't have to carry it all by yourself anymore. We're supposed to be a team, remember?" He looked away for a second, like the idea still made him uncomfortable. "I'm not used to that," he said. "I've always been the one people leaned on. I don't know how to be the one who leans." I leaned forward and kissed his shoulder gently. "It's okay to lean. It doesn't make you weak. It just means you're human." He went quiet again, but this time his silence didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a door slowly opening. After a moment, he spoke, voice low and steady. "When I was younger, I used to pray every night that no one would ever find out about me. About who I really was. I thought if they knew I liked boys, they'd hate me. Or leave me. Or worse." He swallowed hard, eyes glassy now. "And when I met you, I finally felt like I could stop hiding. But that feeling came with so much fear. Because what if I finally showed someone who I really am and they walked away anyway?" I felt tears sting the back of my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. I needed to be strong for him in that moment. I reached up and cupped his face, forcing him to look at me. "I'm still here," I said. "I'm not walking away. I've seen the scared version of you, the silent version, the messy one, and I still choose you. Every single day." A single tear slipped down his cheek and landed on my wrist. He closed his eyes, like he was finally letting himself believe the words that we didn't say much else that night. We didn't need to. We just lay there, tangled in each other, the weight between us finally beginning to shift. I thought about how love isn't just found in the good days, in the laughter, in the kisses at the door. Sometimes it's found in the middle of the storm, when everything feels broken and scary and raw, and you still choose to stay. Still choose to fight. Still choose each other. The next morning, he did something small that meant everything. He made breakfast again, scrambled eggs, toast, and this time, he remembered the pepper. He placed the plate in front of me with a shy smile. "I'm trying," he said. "I know it doesn't fix everything, but I'm trying." I took the plate, smiled back, and nodded. Trying means more than you know. We sat at the table, the sun warming the room, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were beginning again. Not as strangers, not as two people pretending to be fine, but as us. Real. Flawed. Still figuring it out. But together. Later that day, he showed me something he'd written in his notebook the night before. A new page. One that simply read, "I'm afraid. But I'm not alone." And that changes everything. And it really did. Because for the first time, we weren't just surviving the silence. We were filling it with truth. With trust. With love that had been tested and still stood strong. Love that was no longer afraid of the dark. The days continued to unfold slowly, each one carrying a little more light than the one before. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, but something steady and honest. We were learning how to exist in the same space again, not as two people avoiding the truth, but as two people letting it bleed gently into the air between us. The quiet moments weren't heavy anymore. They had become spaces where we could breathe. There was a softness between us that hadn't been there in weeks. The kind of softness that comes when both people realize they've hurt each other unintentionally, and instead of building more walls, they lay down bricks of understanding. But even as things were beginning to mend, something inside me still felt unsettled. Not in a bad way. Just unfinished. Like there was one more piece I hadn't been brave enough to face. That I carried it with me through everything. The meals, the walks, the evenings curled up on the couch. It sat quietly in the back of my mind, whispering truths I wasn't sure I was ready to say. Until one night, after he had drifted to sleep beside me, breathing steady and warm, I found myself staring at the ceiling in the dark, wide awake with thoughts that wouldn't let me rest. I turned gently onto my side and looked at him, taking in the calm on his face. He looked peaceful in sleep, younger somehow, like the years had peeled away the stress and left behind the boy he used to be. My chest tightened as I watched him, because I realized something I hadn't fully accepted before. Part of the reason I had pretended to sleep that night was because I didn't trust myself either. Not just him. Me. I had grown so used to waiting for people to leave that even when I loved someone, I was still halfway out the door in my mind. I needed to protect myself, and sometimes that meant building invisible barriers between us. But love doesn't survive when both people are hiding behind walls. That I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake him, and walked to the living room. The apartment was silent, lit only by the soft blue light of the street lamps outside. I sat on the couch and let the silence wrap around me, pulling my knees to my chest. That's when it hit me. I had spent so much time waiting for him to prove he still loved me that I hadn't stopped to show him I still loved him. I'd been watching his every move, interpreting silences, collecting small signs like pieces of evidence, waiting for a verdict that I had already written in my head. And maybe I was wrong. Maybe I had hurt him too, without even realizing it. I sat there for a long time, thinking about all the moments I could have reached for his hand but didn't, all the times I could have asked, "Are you okay?" but stayed silent instead. I thought about how many times I'd let my fear get louder than my love. And then I remembered something he said. "I've been hurting alone for too long." Maybe we both had. When I finally went back to the bedroom, he was still asleep, turned slightly toward my side of the bed like he'd been waiting for me. I slipped under the covers and moved close, wrapping my arm around him gently. He stirred a little, just enough to know I was there, and then melted into the touch. In that moment, something in me settled. I didn't need to say anything. I just needed to hold him and remind us both that even when things were hard, even when we were afraid, we were still choosing each other. The next morning, I decided I wouldn't wait for another moment to pass me by. I sat across from him at breakfast, watching him stir his coffee slowly, his eyes still puffy from sleep. "Can I tell you something?" I asked. He looked up, slightly surprised, but nodded. "Of course." I took a deep breath. That night when I pretended to sleep, I wasn't just afraid of what you might do or say. I was afraid of what it meant about me. About us. I thought if I stayed silent and just watched, I'd find answers. But all it did was show me how much I still live in fear. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being left. And I realized I've been so focused on protecting myself that I forgot how to fight for us. He didn't speak for a long time. He just stared at me, the kind of stare that sees deeper than words. Then, quietly, he reached across the table and took my hand. "I didn't know you felt that way," he said. I thought I was the only one struggling." I gave him a sad smile. "That's the problem. We both thought we were alone in it." He nodded slowly, like the truth of it was settling into him too. After that conversation, things began to shift more quickly. We didn't avoid the hard topics anymore. We started asking real questions. "How are you really feeling today? Is there something you've been carrying alone?" We wrote little notes for each other, started leaving them around the apartment, on the fridge, in drawers, inside books we knew the other would open. Nothing big. Just small reminders. "I love the way you look when you're focused. You're stronger than you know. I'm proud of how far we've come." It sounds simple, but those notes built something between us. A bridge. A steady rhythm. A new language that said, "I see you. I hear you. I'm here." We even revisited places that had meaning to us. The little cafe where we had our first real date. The park where we first held hands in public and felt both terrified and alive. At the park, he turned to me with a soft smile and said, "This is the first place I realized I could actually have this, have love, and not hide." I reached for his hand and squeezed it. "And this is the place I realized I never want to let it go." That night back at home, we stood by the window and watched the city lights flicker. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You know," he whispered, "even though that night scared me, thinking you were asleep while I talked to myself, it also saved me. Because it made me realize how close I came to losing the one person who makes all of this feel real." I leaned into him, my heart full, my body finally relaxed in a way it hadn't been in weeks. "We didn't lose each other," I said. "We just forgot how to reach." And we were reaching again now. With words. With touch. With presence. We were building something new, not a return to who we used to be, but a deeper, stronger version of who we could be together. The hurt didn't disappear, but it started to matter less compared to the way we were healing. And healing, we learned, isn't always loud or fast. Sometimes it's slow, quiet, full of long pauses and late-night whispers. But it's real. And that's what we had now. Something real. Something worth every moment we fought to save it. It had been weeks since that night, since the moment everything cracked open and we finally began to speak the words we were too afraid to say out loud. Since then, our lives had started to feel different. Not perfect. Not magically healed. But honest. And somehow, that made all the difference. There was a quiet steadiness in the way we moved around each other now. The small gestures that once went unnoticed were now moments we both paused to feel. A gentle brush of the hand. A soft kiss on the shoulder in passing. A shared smile across the table. It was like we were learning each other all over again, but deeper this time, more aware of the bruises and the spaces that needed gentleness. We weren't rushing anything. We weren't pretending the pain never happened. Instead, we were holding it together, acknowledging the way it changed us and using that as a guide to keep moving forward. One Sunday afternoon, we decided to clean out our storage closet. It was one of those tasks we'd avoided forever, always saying, next weekend, but never following through. But something about where we were now made us want to face things, everything. Not just emotionally, but physically. We pulled out old boxes, opened dusty containers filled with memories from the past. There were things from before we met, from our early days, from the in-between months when we were still figuring out what we meant to each other. Photographs, ticket stubs, random receipts from spontaneous road trips. I found a faded Polaroid of us, sitting on a bench at the beach, his head on my shoulder, both of us smiling like nothing in the world could ever touch us. I held it for a long time. Not because I wanted to go back to that exact moment, but because I realized we had survived everything that came after it. The smiles had faded for a while. The light had dimmed. But here we were. Still holding on. He came over, looking at the photo in my hand. "We looked so young," he whispered. I smiled. "We were young. And scared. And clueless." He chuckled softly, taking the photo from me and staring at it. "And now?" he asked, almost like he wasn't sure what the answer would be. I looked at him, really looked at him, the way his eyes had softened over the past weeks, the way he held himself differently now, less guarded, more open. "Now we're still scared," I said. "But we're brave enough to say it. And that's everything." Later that night, we sat on the balcony wrapped in blankets, a bottle of wine between us, the city humming below. The sky was clear, stars barely visible through the city lights, but we still looked up as if searching for something bigger than ourselves. I turned to him and asked something I'd been holding on to quietly. "Do you think we needed to fall apart like that?" He didn't answer right away. He just took another sip of wine, stared out into the night, and then nodded. "Yeah," he said. "I think we did. Not because the pain was necessary, but because it showed us what we were missing. I didn't realize how much I needed you until I almost lost you. And I didn't realize how much I was hurting you by shutting you out." His words wrapped around me like a blanket. "I was shutting you out too," I admitted. "I thought I was protecting myself, but I was just building a wall between us. I let my fear convince me that silence was safer than honesty. But it wasn't. It never is." He reached for my hand, fingers intertwining with mine, warm and familiar. "We both got lost," he said. "But we found our way back. That's what matters." And it did. It mattered more than any fight we'd had, more than any tear we'd shed, more than any moment we thought we were too far gone. There was something incredibly powerful about rebuilding something you thought was broken. It's not about going back to how things used to be. It's about creating something stronger because you've seen what it looks like to almost lose it. You know what's at stake. You know how fragile love can be if left in the dark. So you learn to water it with patience, to protect it with truth, to tend to it with effort, not just in the good times but especially in the hard ones. That's what we were doing now. Rebuilding. Not from scratch, but from the ashes of everything we'd let burn between us. The following week, we took a trip. Nothing fancy. Just a weekend away in a small town by the coast. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere with no distractions, no reminders of the tension that once lived between our walls. We walked the shoreline in silence, hand in hand, letting the sound of the waves remind us of what it means to be steady even when everything around you moves. One night, we sat by the fire pit outside the small cabin we'd rented. He looked over at me, eyes reflecting the soft flicker of flames, and said, "You know, I don't think I've ever let anyone see me like this. Not all of me. Not the parts that shake when no one's looking." I moved closer, placed my head on his shoulder. "You're safe with me," I said. "Every part of you. Even the ones that shake." He exhaled deeply, and in that breath I felt something finally release. An old fear, a leftover doubt, something that had been lingering for too long. When we returned home, the apartment felt different. It wasn't just a place we lived in. It was a space that had witnessed our unraveling and our repair. It had heard our silences, seen our distance, felt our tears. And now it held something else: truth, growth, forgiveness. We moved through the rooms like people who had rediscovered the meaning of home. Not just a roof and four walls, but a place built with love, even when it was messy. Especially then, that night, lying in bed again, he turned to me and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I reached out and touched his cheek, soft and slow. "Thank you for coming back to me," I whispered. "Even when it was hard. Even when it hurt." He kissed me then. Gently. Deeply. Not to prove anything. Just to say I'm here. I'm still yours. I never stopped being. And in that moment, everything that had once felt broken didn't disappear. But it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was us. Right there. Together. Still choosing. Still loving. Still learning. And no longer pretending to sleep just to feel safe. Because now, we were finally wide awake. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories. Subscribe for more real, emotional gay love stories every week, told with truth and tenderness. And if you've ever felt alone in love, drop a red heart in the comments. We read every single one. Share this video with someone who needs to hear they're not alone. Until next time, stay kind, stay soft, and stay brave. Dizzy Rainbow.